My real side experiences tend slot into three categories, generally speaking. There are the viewers that I am shown, that I bear witness to, where the insertion into the experience of a simulated avatar for my awareness to operate through isn't necessary. For if we do participate directly with the simulated events, if we operate through a simulated vehicle, this can be advantageous in that we can engage with the other participants, as it is, after all, the personal selves on the simulated side we must get the attention of as we present the opportunity of the ears, etc. It is the personal selves that must initially free will decide to align their intents with the real intent of the real awareness to kick-start the process of awareness, and so for that, to operate within the simulation is essential. But additionally, we can then be impacted by the simulation and the created simulated vehicles of others we are engaging with, which is generally unavoidable, the confrontations, the attacks, etc., but through which we can also become more capable, more aware, more adaptable, and in fact, attacks in all their forms can highlight agreements to be realized and released. For a successful attack or assault is indicative of an agreement in relation to our assailants that we are maintaining that facilitates their ability to successfully bestow harm upon us, as nothing of any simulated nature experience-wise can be effected if the idea causes the agreements are absent. But on occasion, as I said, it isn't required for simulation insertion if we are simply to report a creational occurrence. The second type of experience would be then those where direct simulated insertion is prudent, for the reasons I have mentioned, gleaning the attention of the personal selves of others, garnering agreement, or cultivating awareness through the more impacting experiences that direct simulated involvement can provide. The third category would be what we might term the assignments. Overall, we are gathering agreement for the various galactic endeavors that ultimately serve to benefit all life and awareness, to afford greater survivability in the simulators as an aid to the awareness process. For although real awareness, the ears, is a reality aside from the simulators and what takes place there, we still need the simulated training grounds for our experiences, our references, and ears comparisons, and far better is it to operate in a classroom that isn't on fire or on the verge of being destroyed. Oftentimes I am involved in what would be construed as the interjection into the decided affairs of others, sometimes rescue efforts as an example. We can't really say this is interference, for I can't assume the role of a rescuer or present as that which alters the course of events without the agreement, the permitted ability to do so. The roles have to be assigned by the individuals whose experiences we are interjecting ourselves into. As we all are the movie makers of our own simulation, and if we have attackers, if we have rescuers, if we have those who enter our experience and redirect what was unfolding, it is because agreements are present in our consciousness that have allowed this to be so. And of course, as we operate from a real awareness, making sense with the life position, our assignments, rescues and interjections will be ultimately of a beneficial nature, ultimately that which serves awareness in some shape or form. This real side experience would be then what I would categorize as a simulated interjection into the affairs, the choices, agreements of others, but for their benefit, awareness speaking. It's not always made apparent as to where the benefit lies, but generally, if we are impacting a decided course of agreement-effected events, this will benefit those involved. We may, as an example, improve circumstances for individuals, which is more conducive for their awareness processes. We remove them from the burning classroom, so to speak. The situation was as follows, afforded by the simulated visuals and real awareness impressions. There was a species of what I would describe as humanoid beings, human in appearance to an extent, but with differences. Their body forms seemed irregularly designed. From a human's perspective, they would look malformed, but this was the decided body form as effected from the species consciousness, and served them as well as any other body type operating in creation. They were a space-faring species, and indeed were relocating from their home planet to a new location. The reasons for this was never revealed, though presumably some situation had made their planet of origin uninhabitable, and a repositioning elsewhere was necessary for the perpetuation of the species. And so they were embarking across creational space in a fleet of vessels. The vast majority of the vessel-bound species were placed in a suspended animation of a kind that the distance traversed would pass more swiftly and perhaps even prevent aging, as it seemed rather a lengthy journey from their home world to their decided destination. Always there would be a skeleton crew who would maintain essential functions aboard each ship. Each maintenance crew had a certain shift duration before entering cryogenic suspension and being relieved then by another, and so it would not be the same group of individuals expected to ensure the ship's safety throughout the entire journey's duration. It was as though, in order to reach their final destination, the vessels had to pass through an especially hazardous area of space. but they would not be aware of the perilous nature of it. The dangerous area of a space was due to the presence of a kind of organism that existed in a space. It wasn't dark force affiliated, but more so had a particular consciousness where its body form was that of a huge expansive mass that would automatically attack any other species that happened upon its path, and somewhat assimilate them, absorb them into itself. This would not be the destruction of the other species, but more so they would become a part of it, an extension of this curious organism body form, but not independent within it, rather like becoming as a collective hive mind, though the same overall body mass. This, as I have mentioned previously on other real side experiences, is an expression of a body form establishing itself extensively in this simulator at this time, where, whatever form it takes, it has the consciousness, design, intent, and ability to increase its number, or in this case, its overall mass, through the assimilation of other species, but as I said, making the other species and individuals a part of it, part of its collective mind. This would not be beneficial for the species that this particular organism successfully snared, as it had but a rudimentary developed intellect, and would be considered then somewhat a downgrade to be a part of such a mind collective, if one were a species with a space travel capability. And although intellect and technological prowess has nothing to do with real awareness, one's developed consciousness has no bearing on the true reality and real awareness true self, aside from the simulated body forms. Clearly, the nature of the consciousness can be a factor on our awareness processes. However, it can be a detriment if the consciousness is very limited, restricted, and indeed part of a collective that maintains such limitation, as was the case here with this organism. Any consciousness can be moved aside from and objectified, disattached from, regardless of its design, but the more limited, restricted, and idea distortion compounded consciousness is, the more the limitation-laden construct that it is must be faced and worked through. And as I said, being locked into a collective consciousness is somewhat a usurping of one's own free will decision-making and intent, and if the collective has no interest in real awareness, then this may be problematic. Should a species perhaps be on such a process of awareness, and then find themselves part of such an organism and an awareness disinterested collective hive mind. This then was an opportunity for interjection. Likely then these were a species overall that were perhaps either on their awareness processes or getting set to be so, and should they enter this dangerous region of space and inevitably cross the path of this giant organism, it would absorb all of them, the vast majority of them, as they slumbered in suspension, into itself, and into the limited, restricted, collective consciousness that it was, very likely derailing their awareness processes or the process they were about to begin. But life supports life, for as it is determined, a species is setting intent with the real awareness and the ears, so the support is afforded. For as we set intent, simulation rolls out to facilitate it, and so an intent set with the ears and simulation circumstances become so that the ears recognizing intent is actualized, assuming it is maintained, and the roles of rescuer and interjector into decided, agreed to affairs can be afforded by the individuals, or in this case species, to those agreeable to assume them, perhaps not consciously realized by the personal selves of those who require such support, to ensure this is recognizing trajectory is not derailed, which it can't be if the intent with it is maintained, as simulation must follow intent. And so, a group and myself had been simulated inserted onto one of these vessels. We had in fact assumed the body forms of the very species occupying the vessels, and indeed specifically one of the groups that were due for their maintenance shift cycle. The actual group whose cycle it was would not be awakened from their cryo-sleep. The group and I had mimicked then the appearance of the very group set to begin their watch. With access to everything creational the real awareness has, as the real awareness is a part of this isness, everything reality, this everything that we each are, being through all consciousness, as it effects into all simulation and through all body forms as it does, so anything can be provided in the experiences, whatever is required for every eventuality, including the technological capability of any species we become involved with. And so the group and I had access to the technological skills and know-how that allowed us to prevent the next shift maintenance group from awakening. As I said, we then assumed their exact forms and took their places. Always, with each maintenance group, would be one additional individual, who rather was in the role of an overseer, and would remain with the group until their shift was complete, join them in a cryo-sleep, then another group would awake, along with another overseer, individual, etc. An overseer was present for the latest shift rotation, but would not be a part of our group, and so it was a good test, in a way, to determine how successful was our subterfuge, and indeed we gave no indication or sign that we were anything other than the genuine maintenance crew. We arose no suspicions, as we went about various computer calibrations that were essential for the vessel, minute course corrections, etc., that were needed, and so forth. For indeed, it seems we had picked the very vessel which rather dictated the adjustments as made throughout the entire fleet, as though we were stationed on the flagship, and all other vessels and their respective maintenance crews would synchronize any course corrections with what the lead ship's crew decided. And so it was that the group and myself were able to then make alterations to the course we were taking, subtle enough that it went unnoticed by the overseer, but to the extent that we would be able to avoid the area of space we were previously set to pass through that contained the dangerous organism. This done, the fleet, now safe and destined to reach its objective position without incident, our shift duration was coming to a conclusion. We would have to vacate the vessel before the crew that would replace us awoke, or effectively the new team would be met with two versions of those they were replacing, one set in a cryo-sleep and another operating on the ship. And perhaps there might be questions asked later if indeed the team we had taken the position of had no memory of working their shift, etc., when they emerge from cryo-sleep for their next work cycle. As it transpired, there was one other individual on this particular shift cycle we had taken who had also been awoken, a kind of a counsellor or species therapist, as though one of the maintenance crew we had replaced required such a counsel, the species version of psychotherapy, and so it was arranged this counsellor would be present during his shift cycle. This particular individual who required such support was the one I had assumed the form of, and so I rather had to attend therapy sessions, as it were, during what was his watch cycle. Interestingly, the psychotherapist was very aware, again indicating that as a species they were moving toward the embracing of the awareness process, or already were doing so, each individual at their own respective pace, etc. And at one point during a therapy session, as I played the role, so to speak, she would rather see through my outward form, my pretense, as though seeing through the simulated front with assistance via her real awareness, a real awareness which can read everything behind what is literally and visually presented, simulated front-wise. She would not only be a psychotherapist, very aware, as I said, but also had a particular developed consciousness where she had cultivated abilities that had her very attuned to a nature, a kind of species calling or path she had been involved with prior to her awareness process, though she integrated the two, and this was proving overall beneficial for her. The closest human idea approximation would be that of the shaman I'd have suggested. It was as though her real awareness impressions alerted her to what was a deception on the part of myself and the group, but her personal self was assured also as to our well-placed intentions. She did speak with me about a great many things, much of which were associated with her species equivalent of shamanism. At the time, it all made sense, from a real awareness standing position, which was accessing and providing everything required to operate as one of their species, to utilize all of the technology, to be able to function as one of them, the marshalling of all of the ideas of their social consciousness, etc., but bringing it all back to the physical and my personal self on waking, and trying to describe it with comparable available references from the human experience isn't always easy. Much is rather lost in translation, and so much of what she said, making sense in that moment, became as though nonsensical on waking. But she did as though apply some form of her species healing or beneficial adjustment to my consciousness, irrespective of the outward form I was currently occupying, and for whatever reason it would make my eyes flash a bright luminous orange colour. As she was understanding as to the reasons for the involvement of the group and myself, I would provide all details regarding it, for indeed there would be questions raised as to how a group that remained in a cryo-sleep managed to perform their shift cycle, and so it would be her decision, in full knowledge of what had taken place, to either feign ignorance, fabricate an explanation, or reveal the truth as to what had transpired. But she realized the prudence of the intervention, as I explained the nature of the dangerous, potentially species-assimilating organism, and how such body form expressions were a common presence now in this simulator. And there the experience would end, the group and I departing the vessel, the fleet still on a course for their decided destination, absent of the perils of having what would be their species' overall awareness process disrupted by an organism that, on absorbing them into its collective, would harbour as a collective mindset no personal intent with the ears or awareness. And as I said, the psychotherapist was very aware, a leading light among the species, I would suggest, and it will be interesting to see if she, or this particular species she is a part of, features again in future real side experiences, if they step up, and in what capacity. And so, sing the new you song. It is your connection to the true reality all life is, and the real you, your real awareness that is a part of it. New